Today is all about positioning, and positioning is so important when it comes to doing the things that God has asked you to do by faithfully walking them out, um, but doing it from a posture that keeps God on the throne and gives him the glory rather than seeking the success for yourself. Which I'll tell you, I've done it both ways in my life. And, um, when things are tested, the only things that actually remain are the things that we've built with the correct posture. And through that, it really is positioning. And so I have a great example of this. One of my friends, one of the girls on my team, she is someone who's building her business God's way. And, she just had a vendor fair that she, took part in. And, anytime my team is doing any kind of vendor fairs or these kinds of things, I always ask them, because these types of things, like, I'm sure you've been to a vendor fair before. You know that, like, you like walk by different booths, right? And there are certain things that catch your eye, but you don't typically spend very long there, right? Because there are a lot of things to see. And so, like, that's the perspective I've always taken in coaching my team on, you know, how to make them successful, because they did a lot of work in preparation, and you want to make sure that it is a good use of your time, right? And so, a lot of businesses out there will take the approach of, like, let's just sell some products quick, right? Keep some products on hand and whatever. I think that may have worked in the past, but now, the approach that we've taken is you only have a few seconds with people. So how can you connect with them, and how can you keep connection as the goal, and then have a plan on the back end to go deeper with them and, get to know them so they can get to know you, so that you can build trust, because we do business with people we know, like, and trust, right? At the end of the day, that's how it is, right? Or we buy products or use products or work with companies based on the experiences of people we know, like, and trust, right? And so anyway, back to my friend and my business partner. She had an awesome vendor fair where, she had made some cookies with, some of our different products, like our protein, and so she was giving those out. And so that was, like, her way to bring people in, like, hey, if you want to try a protein cookie, right? And so, of course, who doesn't love a cookie? And who doesn't love one with protein in it? And then if it tastes great, awesome. Okay, now I'm there. Now I'm listening. Like, and then, she had some products on the table too, and people are like, oh, like, is this what you use? And so, like, that started the conversation, but that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't to sign people up there, or even, like, to think about selling a product, right? The goal there was connection. And because she has an email list, and she has, like, a freebie download that she offers, that really spoke to these people that were stopping. She ended up getting 19 new subscribers through this, to her email newsletter list, or email list, whatever you want to call it. And I just thought that was so awesome, because this is a prime example of positioning, right? Like, it's the pairing of the hard, consistent work, in the way that the Lord has called you, without seeing results and without doing it for your own glory, right? And that's where the positioning comes in. And the positioning is us doing the work so that God can provide through that. And in this case, it was the provision of, these 19 people who decided to, join her email list, and, so she can have further conversation with them and go deeper. And I just thought that this was such a prime example of what positioning looks like when you're building a business God's way. And, as I said, in my business, I've done it both ways. There have been seasons where I built my business my way, and every time it leads to burnout, the ick of doing things that just don't necessarily align with your character. And not that they're, like, sinful, in and of themselves, but, like, it's almost like a forcing it, right? Whereas positioning, on the other hand, is really being faithful to do the work, but knowing full and well who actually sends the provisions, so then you can give him the glory for those provisions. And so, in the times that I have forced it, and I always use the example of when I earned a cruise in my company. I remember the moment of sitting in our global conference and learning about this new opportunity, this new way that non-business leaders, because I wasn't a business leader at the time, non-business leaders actually had the option to earn this trip. And that wasn't the case ever before. It was always something for business leaders and above, like not just first rank. Oh, I think I was a business leader. Like I was a business leader, but I wasn't like level 3 business leader that typically was the requirement for these kinds of trips, right? And so I was like, yeah, count me in. I remember like that exact moment in my brain of like, can I do this? Yeah, I think I can. I'm going to do it. But like in that moment, I never stopped to ask myself if it was the right season. I never stopped to ask myself if that's actually where God wanted me to spend my energy. And I didn't lay down my will in submission to his, or even not even lay it down, but like even ask the question of if that's what he wanted or not. And so I did, though. Like I went out and I did the work, and I earned that trip. And it's so interesting because when I earned it, I think because of the way I had done it, again, it wasn't that I necessarily did anything shady or sketchy. Like, it's just, I didn't do it necessarily in alignment with what truly feels right and good in my business. Because it was out of alignment with God's will and his timing. And, I really took it in my own hands. I took the success upon my own shoulders. And at the end of that, like, I just felt this kind of emptiness. Like I did this, I earned that trip, but I didn't feel fulfilling in any way, shape, or form. And I mean, it just is an example too, that only God can fulfill us, right? But there is a difference too, that like when we see him work and we give him the glory, like there is a sense of fulfillment in that, in, carrying out his will and, being the ones positioned who have done the work, but he still provides. And so, a lot of the results that I generated during that time of working towards that cruise, a lot of that has faded away. Like it has been eaten up by moths, and a lot of those customers aren't with me anymore. And it was a time of, I did a lot of convincing, convincing people to join the business, convincing people to try the products, all those things. And, and so it just, the whole thing like just didn't really feel good if I had actually stopped for a second to think about it. But then, on the flip side of that, right, like building a business God's way, like when I actually step back and look at my business and look at the lasting results and success that I've had in my business, like they are without a doubt from God and God alone, partnered with me positioning myself by faithfully doing the work, right? Like when I think of positioning, I think of like putting myself in a position to be able to receive the things that he's bringing my way, and not just receive them, but to take good care of them, right? Like and I always think of it this way, like if God brought me like 5 people who wanted to be my customers, but, I wasn't actively, first of all, like looking, like aware of what I was looking for, or if, I wasn't in the habit of many times saying like, hey, I don't know if this would be a good fit for you, but I'd be happy to tell you more, like taking those proactive steps, or like when they're like, hey, I want to order with you, or hey, I want to start a business with you. Like I still have to help them get set up. I have to educate them, make sure that they understand their benefits, how to save the most money. I am still like training them, doing all those things, right? Rewarding them. And like, those are things that I wouldn't do if I wasn't positioning myself to be able to accept and care for, steward essentially, the provisions that God brings. And, when I look back at my business leaders, like I can't take credit for orchestrating them joining me. I was willingly there, positioned to answer their questions and to ask them, like, hey, I think this might be a good fit for you. Do you want to take a look? I'm happy to tell you more, that kind of thing, like that kind of positioning. But like, it was totally orchestrated by God. Like, one of my business leaders, like we met the Sunday before the world shut down, in the side room of the church we were both attending at the time. It wasn't even like the main sanctuary or anything like that. And we just connected and we started hanging out and got to know each other and realized like we were both on missions for helping people, and we totally aligned. And, the business has been an awesome vehicle for us to have physical ways and solutions that we can help people. And then, my other business leader, she and we connected through a MOPS group, and like, I just happened to be sitting at her table, right? Like, coincidence? No. And actually we never talked anything about health or business or anything during that time. And it wasn't until like later on, like before we were getting ready to move from Pennsylvania to Missouri, that she actually reached out to me and asked about, some of our like protein and weight loss and cleanse products. And like, we got together, like I said, hey, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. And, and we got together and we talked about it at Chick-fil-A while my kids played and were crazy. And, and it wasn't a couple years until she started the business. And then, it was like a year or two later when she, dove in and really, started actively building her business, And so it's things like that like, I still had to be there and willing and ready to do the work, right? Like, but God brought them to me, very clearly brought them to me. And, just like he has very clearly always, brought me the customers when I needed them and has asked me to take care of them and steward them, right? And like, that's a part of all of this, but it really comes down to that positioning, right? It's like, I always think of health as, like there are some places in this world where if you want to be a missionary to get there, like you have to hike to the middle of nowhere, right? Like, so I've always looked at that, like about my health, as in like, if God calls me to go somewhere that's really difficult and challenging, I don't want any of my decisions to hold me back from that. I don't know why I've always thought about that. I think it's because there was somewhere, I think it was, I don't even know where it was. I think it was in Haiti. Like there was like this really remote part where like you could only hike to get there. And I was just like, what if God called me to go there? Like, am I going to let my health hold me back from answering the call? Like Isaiah, I'm here, Lord, send me, right? Like, and so like, that's what I think of when I think of positioning. It's like the daily decisions that we're making in all these different areas of our life that are a holistic thing, so that, when God brings a provision, we are ready to say, yes, Lord, I'm here, send me, right? And so, and that could be in your health, that can be in your fitness, that can be in your relationships. If you are someone who has your head down all the time when you're out in public places, how are you going to have interactions with people where you might be able to share the gospel, or you might be able to just start a relationship so that you can go deeper, right? There are no coincidences. Just in the last couple of weeks here, like God has made it very clear that he is getting me here, the kids here, specifically while Zach goes to his ILE course in Kansas. I met a new neighbor, and, has dabbled in church, didn't grow up in church, like has a bad taste in her mouth about it. Another neighbor who is searching, but doesn't have a faith of her own. And then, just a couple weeks ago, I was actually, Bo and I were out running some errands. I got my eyebrows waxed because, as Bo said, they were kind of like monsters and he doesn't like that. That was really funny. But in the strip mall where we were at, at the end is a Marshall's, and I had a gift card, and I actually at the time I couldn't find my sunglasses, which now I found like all three pairs of sunglasses. I've got like all these sunglasses, but in between there's a Petco. Now we only have a cat, but I thought, you know what, that would be kind of fun to take Bo in and just see what kind of animals they have, because they always have some animals there. And I had this overwhelming urge just to go in and look at these animals, right? And like we kind of made a beeline for the back of the store, and there was another little boy back there that was about Bo's age who was looking at all the hamsters and gerbils and mice and all those things. And he and Bo just started chatting and hanging out and like running around and like kind of playing together. And like the mom was there, and apparently this isn't normal for people to do. I thought it was, but I guess it's just me. But I started talking to her, and I was just like, oh, hey, like, whatever, like one thing led to another. Like we ended up hanging out. We got our kids together to play at a park, like a week later, because it happened to be spring break, or maybe it was just later that week. Anyway, and, and like now we're going to their house this weekend for a, Easter egg hunt, which we don't typically do, but and like these people, they're so great, but I really got from them also that they don't really have a faith of their own. And so it's just like there are no such thing as coincidences. And I don't believe that all things happen for a reason in the churchy sense of like, well, everything happens for a reason, because yeah, sometimes things happen because there's sin in this world and people suck. And there are consequences, right? But I don't believe that like these kinds of quote unquote coincidences are the same thing. Like I truly believe like these things are orchestrated by God. And if we're like head down, not paying attention, how are we going to see these things, right? And so like these are all falling into this positioning thing. Like, are we like with our head up, with our eyes open, with our ears open, listening? Like, are we looking for these opportunities to serve the Lord in whatever capacity that is, to steward the provisions that He brings to us, to willingly do the work, stewarding these things and taking care of them in whatever way that looks like, whether that's business or relationships or sharing the gospel, because it's so easy, especially in our Western culture, to just get so busy and so wrapped up in what is my plan, what is my time, what's my schedule, like what are my plans, and to completely disregard what God's will is and how He's leading us, and to be able to hear the gentle whisper of His promptings, in those moments, like go into Costco. Like, it's not like I audibly heard someone say, go into Costco, but I just felt this overwhelming urge to go into the store. And also while we were in there, I saw this really awesome looking dog. It was a Doberman, but not like the American Dobermans that like look mean, but are like not really that big of dogs. Apparently this was a European Doberman, and those things are built like they look like the toughest cop you've ever seen in your life, like in real life. Like seriously, if I was going to get a guard dog, I'd be getting me a European Doberman. Those things are BA. Seriously. So cool looking. But it was so gentle too. It was like a gentle giant. Anyway, so that was totally a tangent. And my life runs on tangents for sure. So positioning. I hope that through all of this, that what you take away is that God is orchestrating things behind the scenes. And it's so interesting. So we just started Esther, a Bible study with the women's group that I'm in. And I never knew this, but God is actually never mentioned in the book of Esther, like at all. And that's something I had never thought about, I guess, or never learned. But here's the cool thing about Esther is you see all of these coincidences that are not coincidences. You see these fingerprints of God working in all of these areas behind the scenes, orchestrating things, to redeem and save His people. And so that's really what positioning is it's us having our eyes and ears open and our hands open and our plans open, our will submitted and surrendered to him, so that when we notice, like, we're actively looking for these fingerprints of him, to see these coincidences and to lean into them, you know. And it kind of goes along the lines of Godwinks. I don't know if you guys have ever heard me talk about these Godwinks, but Godwinks are those like unspoken prayers that you have that come to be, and you just feel deep down in your soul like, thanks God, like that was from you. So I'll give you an example. I love hydrangea bushes, and when we moved to our second house in Pennsylvania, I just felt so much confirmation that we were moving where we were supposed to, because like we showed up and just like all around the front porch are all these hydrangea bushes, and like that was a God wink to me. Like that was something God knew that I loved, that like brings joy to my heart and a smile to my face. And it just seemed like so much confirmation to me, you know, and it wasn't a coincidence, it was a God wink. And then the fact that Gabe, you know, at the time he was only like 3 or 4, I think, and maybe he was 4. And he had been praying for us, like, I think it was like 3, and he wanted more bathrooms was the bottom line. And I can't remember exactly how many he was praying for. But this house that we moved from actually only had 1.5 bathrooms. And this new house that we moved to had 3 full-size bathrooms and a half. So it had like 3.5. Like it was crazy. Like so many bathrooms in this house. Way too many tubs to clean. Which is one of my least favorite chores, I think. I don't know why. I just hate it. But, you know, and it was just like a God wink to him, like at such an early age. Like God listens and, you know, hears those little things that honestly don't matter to anyone else in this world but you. And it's like God saying, like, I see you and I hear you and I know the little things that you want, that maybe you don't even say, or maybe you don't even ask, and I still want to give those to you. So with positioning, it's really about that willingness to constantly be looking and listening and, you know, flexible and not so stinking busy or noise all the time so that you can't see the have the margin, to be able to slow down and look around, you know, look at the people around you and really see the people. Because, you know, when we look at Jesus's life, like he was never hurried, was he? He was never in a hurry. He was never rushed. He spent time with people. He saw people, you know, and he sat with them, and he also made intentional time to get away too, and to be, you know, with his brothers, and to be with, you know, his disciples and the Lord, and you know what I mean? Like, but he also had work to do, and he did that, you know, like he positioned himself, like his whole life was positioning himself, right? And so I guess I take encouragement in that, when I think about how I'm doing business, and, like it just, God will confirm time and time again, if you are willing to lay your own plans down and to pick up his and to look for them and to actively respond when you feel or hear those promptings within your soul, you know, those gentle whispers, those urges, that could only come from him. And, you know, just being willing to position yourself to do the work, right? Like I always say, like, you got to put legs on that prayer. You know, if you're praying that God would somehow provide more income for you, but you're just sitting around, like, I'm sorry to tell you, but sometimes you just got to put legs on those prayers, you know. And there are times, like, especially when Zach and I were much younger, newly married, like did not have a lot of income at all. Like I was the breadwinner for a long time, working at the bank, and I didn't make that much money. You know, and there were some months, like after we had bought our house and moved in and we had Holly and we were pregnant with Gabe, like there were months where we were like, ooh, I don't know how we're going to make ends meet this month. And, you know, all of a sudden a bonus check would show up from Zach's work, you know, or like I would earn some incentive at work, or, something like that, like things would just happen and, God provided. But we still were working at the time, and so sometimes like God doesn't require us to do anything for him to bless us, obviously, because it's not based on what we do or don't do. It's because he's good, and he's generous. But when it comes to us walking out the calling that he has put on our lives and in our hearts, then it is about positioning and it is about doing the work and showing up, especially when you're not seeing the results, and doing it in a way that, is just surrendered to his will and to his timing and for his glory and not our own. And you know what, next time I'm going to be talking about posturing, because I think that that goes along with this so beautifully, because positioning is about what we're doing, but posture is more about how we're being, and really how our heart is focused. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you love this and thought a friend would enjoy it too, share it with them. Can't wait to see you next week. Bye.